Now that we have our sketch, I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer, and I'm going to actually go to inking, this category. We're going to grab Studio Pen, and I am going to go to this sketch layer here, and I'm going to click this N, and this opens up a whole new category of that particular layer. Like it is only working in that layer. So if I were to lower the opacity, the same exact idea with this, when you lower the brush opacity, things get lighter or it gets darker. Same thing with my sketch underneath, you can tell that it gets lighter or darker. So I'm going to actually reduce this down to about, for this example, we'll do 20. And that's awesome. So the layer above it, now I'm going to keep that normal layer. I have my studio pen. I'm going to come over here and I'm actually going to bring this size down to about, I think 2 should work out pretty good. And then I'm going to keep the opacity at 100%. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to outline all of the areas of this turtle that I like. Say we like the curvature of his head. That is a cool thing to have. Let's go ahead and keep that. If you circle around it and you hold it, it'll snap into place and snap right into the grid. So if I were to do something like this, the line's a little wavy, but if I hold it, it goes right back into place. For big shapes like that, I just did that one big swoop, but now it might take a little bit longer. And this is why, because every time I create a new shape, I kind of want to keep it nice and sharp. And one of the best ways to keep your line work nice and sharp is to do fast strokes, because if you take too long, your hand actually gets a little shaky and things get a little wonky and a little weird. Whereas you can kind of, if you do it quickly or if you hold, it'll snap. And like I said before, it'll work that way. I want to make sure that these shapes are flawless. So I'm going to, where I can use those techniques like holding it into place, like right here, I'm going to do that. I'm going to hold it and we're going to snap it into place. And now we have this eye on the side of his head, right? I'm going to come back with the eraser tool. And since this is not sketching, this is like the outline layer or the outline, I want to make sure that it's as clean as possible. This is going to be what I decide to branch out, create, and paint over when I'm done. So definitely make sure that it's exactly what you want it to look like. Okay, let's do this eye, right? So I'm going to just see this eye and I'm going to create a circle all the way around. I'm going to blow it up just a little bit. Cool. Now watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to create another layer over top. I'm going to swoop in and I'm going to grab that because I like that way of the eyelid. And I'm going to grab the eyelid like this. And we're going to create an eyelid right there. Let me just close in some of these gaps on that eyelid. Okay, that's pretty good. But now you're like, okay, well, there's a circle and an eyelid. Well, the reason I created it in its own layer is that now I can go to that circle and I can literally just go over here and we can just remove it. And now we have this really cool effect because we have the circle underneath, but we didn't have to even worry about it. Because look, as much as I want to erase that, I couldn't even erase this if I wanted to because it's on its own layer. So that's a really cool little trick right there. And I can easily just merge these two things down and now it became one. So now it just took out a whole lot of time and saved me a lot of time rather. And so we got this. We'll fix this little eye right here. Right here, I kind of want that to be a little bit cleaner. So feel free to kind of slowly start fixing little areas, fine-tuning lines all the way around. And when it comes to detail work and using the line work and stuff, you want to see where sometimes some of your strokes might be a little weak and they're not fully, like for example, this is kind of tapered off. You see how thick this line is? And then it gets tapered off there. If I want to kind of add thickness to that, I just come back over it and you can just kind of thicken up those lines. And I come from like a tattooing background slightly. I worked at a shop for a little while and I learned some basic techniques when it comes to like building up your lines. And it's kind of the same idea when it comes to doing your outline. So now it looks a little thicker, a little better. I think the sea turtle eye itself should maybe come out a little more here. Like let's make his eye like way bigger, right? So we have the eye. Let's add like a fun little glare. Two little circles will do the trick. I'll do the same thing on this side. One circle and then a slightly smaller circle underneath. And now he's got some characteristics to him so far. So let's work on the nose. I'm going to actually try to see how I kind of want to create this. So if I make it too pointy, it'll look like a sea turtle, but it's just a little bit too pointy for me. I wanted to kind of keep him like a little sock puppet type style. So if I were to, it's a little too much. I think something like that is a little better here. Bring that out just a little bit more. Okay, so I'm gonna erase this part that kind of went way too far out there. Not a big deal. 2 fingers, zoom up on your Procreate. You can kind of fine tune those lines here. And then we'll go ahead and we'll do this guy. Kind of fill that little piece that kind of went out. So here we go. We got some nice little shape. If I keep things nice and short like this, it kind of like almost gives him this little like little smile, like a little smirk or something. If I were to bring it out way back here, I can make it more like sea turtle like, but he kind of looks sad. And I'm like, I don't know if I want him to look sad. But in this particular case, I think that he would look a little bit more like a sea turtle if I kept him looking a little more sad. So, and then for the cause, got to think about your utilities at this point. What is this for? For mine, it's going to be saving the sea turtles. So I am going to make sure that he looks sad and he needs help, because that is my that's my cause and my charity for this particular NFT collection. Let's work on this second part here underneath. And look how fast you can do that. You can just simply grab, flip, grab, flick. The cool thing about having the sketch layer underneath is that it pretty much is training your brain that to put pressure and then release. I see that line that I wanted. I traced the sketch underneath and I created the line that I really, really wanted. So this, I want it to come out a little bit and then over. So in my mind, I'm just gonna do it like that. So that's pretty cool. It's very smooth. And if you notice, I would have taken my time. It would have got really jaggedy. So for this, I want it to be not so jaggedy, but I want it to kind of go up more. That was my mistake on that. So let's try it again. I kind of don't want him to look like he has too much of a double chin. I just wanted just a little something. There we go. That looks pretty cool. If the pieces on the tail ends of these are a little too rounded, you can actually come over here with this eraser and you can kind of do one of these. And this is a cool technique that a lot of cartoon artists do to kind of add sharpness to like almost like a disappearing act for each of these lines, where they don't necessarily have to just be rounded off. It can actually just be cut off. And I think maybe for this, let's try to see how this looks if we were to kind of sharpen this up a little bit. And does it look better? I think it looks a little better here. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll add this other part of his neck. We'll just try to keep tracing it. Feel free to mess around with that undo button. It'll become your best friend. And I used to do it so much that people in the community, for the Botsy community, were like, hey man, why don't you try using 2 fingers? So if you use 2 fingers, you can definitely just undo it just like that. And it's a lot easier. And there we go. There we go. Let's bring that in just a little more. Kind of, if you want to continue a line, by the way, go into, just like you would do like for tattoos and line work with a round 9 round, you would just come up here and then continue on with that line. So you don't ever try to start from the tip and then go, because it'll never be perfect. But if you can kind of start back here, you can almost get that as close as you're going to be able to get with that line being there. So that's pretty decent. Go ahead and we'll grab that. I like the way that that's kind of flowing. Do the same deal like this, and then I'm going to continue that line outwards. We have the basics down, so I can erase the sketch layer underneath. This is what our character would look like. super duper plain, super duper basic. He's got no love in him whatsoever. He's just a bunch of lines, very simple, basic lines. Let's go ahead and try to make our base character a little bit more lively. So let's go ahead and continue to the next part. There's always a little fork in the road where you can decide to always pivot to the left, pivot to the right, which way you want to go with your design. Here's something interesting though. If you were to decide to maybe keep the design super clean, then I would just continue what you're doing. Maybe you can add just a couple little fun elements to keep them very basic, nice little freckles, something maybe like, I don't know, let's say you want to give him like some eyebrows or something, right? Like he's just doing his own thing, right? But if you wanted to maybe make him more realistic, you can make him cartoon realistic is where I kind of like to stay with my style. But if you were to keep some of those, see that background right there we have for the sketch, something about it, if I have it empty, it feels very empty. But when you have this, it almost gives it a little bit of life and substance. And this is because you've added that extra detail layer behind it. So what I like to do, and if you're okay with your main character being what mine is, the sock puppet type sea turtle, I would just simply come back over here and I would grab this studio pen again and I would bring the size to 1. And then I would go over. So this heavy outline is done in a 2. So if I do a 1, that's 1 step lower, which it doesn't take away the main vibe that you get from the actual art. So this is like secondary line work. So if I wanted to maybe give him a little wrinkle under his eye here, or let's see, maybe right here on his mouth. Okay, that's cool. Let's say we want to bring that stitching kind of going towards the bottom here. We can kind of do one of these and we'll follow suit. And then we'll bring it going all the way back around this way. So now we have that line traveling throughout our entire character. Maybe add some stitching, right? Let's just like create like some simple little stitches across here. The fun thing about art though is that sometimes it's nice that not everything is perfect and you got to enjoy that little mistakes. Maybe the little mistakes that maybe only you know, or maybe you didn't pick up on that I already did. But it's the idea that we live in a world that's not perfect. So it's kind of fun to add these little things that make it more realistic. Out of something really fun too, maybe like what if I wanted to have my main character have one of these like little patches. So I'm going to draw a square and I'm going to hold it and it'll snap into gear. Same way I did the circle. See, it's not perfect, but if I hold it, it creates its own thing. On the reference of our sea turtle dude, he's got these cool like little blocks texture, right? His little face and stuff, his head. So I was like, you know what? If my guy's a sock puppet, I don't necessarily want to make it that realistic. I kind of want to do what you would do with a normal sock puppet. And that was like create its own boxes. And we'll make that almost like stitching too. And those dark lines will become the stitch. So let's go ahead and we'll add just a few more. And you want to be kind of aware of your placement. If I were to, like, let's say I create another box here and then another box here, it's not realistic to have box, box, box. Things that look organic and natural look better than things that look like they were put there by people. Like I put that there and you can tell that would, the chances of seeing that pattern in real life are probably not really, it's even an option. It's not even there. So what I like to do is I like to create patterns that are just a little bit off of that. Maybe down here we'll have a big one and we'll just kind of keep the overall idea simplified, but yet we can actually still keep a lot of these fun little things that add that fun balance to our character. There's one tiny one right up here just to bring it all together. And I think that's what it was missing. So here we go. I'm actually going to give him some fun little elements. I'm going to give him like 2 little like 3 little dots by his eye. I'm gonna do little nostrils here. Maybe I want to make the nostrils a little bigger. Let's do circle. Yeah, that's way better. And then I'm gonna add like a little nostril hole. And I think that's pretty good. So here we go. The sea turtle's got some nostrils. And I'm like, okay, this is pretty much as far as I can think to go with this character so far. But let's look one more time. Look at our reference. What's different about him? What's cool about him? He's got a shell. Mine doesn't have a shell. It's all right. I think we understand just by the beak type nose, by the squares and the eyes and the nostrils. I think we can tell this is a sea turtle just by the sketch. But it's going to be even more sea turtle like whenever I start adding the colors. So we're going to add those nice the tones. Maybe we'll do a blue background so it really encapsulates, like if you had a question that it was a sea turtle, now you know it is 100% sea turtle. So now let's remove our sketch. So now look how much more detail we were able to add to our sea turtle just by pulling a little bit more off of the sketch, which is pretty cool. So let's go ahead and get ready for painting. And I'll teach you guys all about shadows and highlights in this next part.